Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior and accomplished professional and an author from The Hague, the Netherlands, Jeroen Derwort. Jeroen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeroen is an entrepreneur and a game developer. He's also an author of a book titled Score, Online Soccer Manager from the Attic to the Arena. So, Jeroen, before we come to your book, a few questions for you. You started programming at a very young age, long before entrepreneurship was fashionable. Looking back, what early experiences most clearly shaped the way you think about building products today?
Well, I learned that building something and especially finishing it is always a good idea.
Hmm.
I've kept even the simplest games I made as a child. I still have them, and I can still look back on them now as something that is truly mine. Entrepreneurship followed automatically because I had built OSM, Online Soccer Manager, which started to become successful. So I had to establish a company for it. And it's not about how you build something. Customers don't find it that important. They only see the end result.
Hmm. Well said. You have spoken about being an introverted builder rather than a natural business leader. How did you learn to lead teams, negotiate deals, and make high stake decisions despite calling yourself an introvert?
Yeah, that didn't happen automatically. I struggled with that a lot. Um, it helped that my company was bootstrapped, which allowed me to build it up slowly.
Hmm.
Because it took years before I dared to stand in front of my own company, my own employees. And I also relied heavily on my co-founder, Frank. Um, we did it together, which made it feel less heavy for me.
Hmm.
And if you do something often enough, you naturally get better at it.
Hmm.
It's still not a hobby of mine. I'd rather build things and talk about content than
Yeah.
about process.
Hmm.
But I was forced to dive into it, and leading people has become easier for me.
Hmm. Well said. And after stepping down as CEO and seeing your companies acquired, how do you now define your role in the technology and startup ecosystem?
Well, I had to think a moment about what I was going to do next. I had two companies, and within 6 months, both of them were sold. On top of that, I was dealing with personal issues during that period. And initially, continued working at CAE, the company that acquired my second startup, Buster. But after a while, I looked for something new, and I've always enjoyed working with students.
Hmm.
And there's a university in my hometown, and they asked me if I wanted to run the game lab. Um, I've been doing that for about 3 years now, and I work with students on game-related projects. I think you can see it behind
Yeah.
me that
Yeah.
I'm in the room right now.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, helping the next generation of game makers. I still make games myself sometimes, not to get rich, but to stay current and keep
Hmm.
learning.
Hmm.
And I'm also the chairman of the Dutch Games Association, and in that role, I can help further the Dutch game industry and make it more successful.
How interesting. Let's come to your book, Yahun, about which is titled Score, Online Soccer Manager from the Attic to the Arena. Your book opens with your childhood as a growing up nerd. Why was it important for you to start the story there rather than with success?
I think there are people with similar struggles who can recognize themselves in this story, and I prefer personal stories and experiences that clarify something over textbooks that tell you how to do things. I think there
Hmm.
are a lot of books like that already, and the road to success is much more interesting than the success itself. I did it find it difficult to start that way because it was a vulnerable time in my life. I was
Hmm.
struggling and I didn't know quite how to get out of that.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily something I'm proud of, but telling it helps people understand the rest of the story better.
Hmm. And your early relationship with computers was deeply personal and even escapist. How did those years of isolation influence the way you later built online communities?
Well, my first computer was an MSX computer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that kind of computer.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's one that I got from my father, and it was indeed. I was quite alone in those years in terms of how I spent my time with it. And when OSM started to become successful and a community formed, it was a breath of fresh air for me. I could talk to people about what I was doing, ask for their opinions, yeah, in contrast to how it was before, that I was just working on something myself and nobody actually knew what I was doing.
Mm,
However, I always filtered those opinions because I quickly noticed that what players say isn't always exactly what they mean.
mm.
And because I worked in as isolation for so long, I knew how important it is to execute a plan and not get too distracted too much.
Right. Well said. The idea for OSM or your online soccer manager emerged from frustration with existing football manager games. Tell me about your frustration and what gap were you most determined to fix when you designed your first version?
Yeah, I think I like those games. I like football management games, but I wanted to play against my friends.
Hmm.
And if you look at football management games in that time, so we're talking about 2001 when I started with Online Soccer Manager, the football games I knew could only be played against the computer.
Mm,
So it was a solo experience, and playing specifically against your friends seemed like a lot of fun to me.
mm,
Um, And besides that, I wanted to play with real player names and club names, not with
hmm,
fictional ones. For example, Real Madrid or Manchester City, Ajax. That's the club from my home country, or PSV Eindhoven. So there's a lot of clubs in the world that people
hmm,
identify with, and I wanted to play with one of those, and have an idea of what
mm,
kind of players are on the pitch, and
mm,
how you would put them there, and then see against your friends who is the best manager. And if you look
mm,
at the more traditional football management games, they're more focused around one manager, achieving something, and this is more a social experience. So that's
mm,
something I wanted from the start.
And that's when you decided to change the entire paradigm, or did you do it in steps, or how did it work?
Yeah, so I had to figure out a way to make that possible. So I, w- I w- I don't think if it already existed, if that I would I would have created that. But I didn't find anything that was the
Hmm.
same as what I wanted. So I made, for example, the one season rule as well, where in Online Soccer Manager you play one season each time, and then the season resets and you have to start over.
Hmm.
And that basically most people ask me if staying with your team for multiple seasons wouldn't that be more fun, right? And I understand it, but playing a single season ensures that every time you start, you begin with a team that resembles real-world counterparts. It creates a connection to the present, and additionally, it makes it easier for managers to flow in and out.
Mm,
So when I thought about that concept, I thought, okay, now I know that I can create something that doesn't exist yet and that I would want to play.
mm,
And if I want to start OSM with my friends today, we can start a league and join an existing one. And if you're and one of the other important factors is that if your team loses, it's temporary. So
mm,
if you have a game where you keep with your team all the time, and then if you lose, you get less money and you go lower in the league, and it just becomes a downward spiral, an endless negative spiral.
mm,
And then you don't get stuck in that with OSM. You can start a new season and everybody starts anew, and
mm,
of course you get some nice cups in your trophy cabinet, and if you're successful, your cabinet will be more full, but you can start over and try again, and maybe this time you will win. So that I think that is something that keeps it fresh and keeps it interesting for all levels of players.
amazing. Yes, I know. And in India, the people are absolutely crazy about cricket, and there's so many different games for cricket. But
Yeah.
Yahun, you describe your OSM, your one season rule, as a radical design choice, and you did explain part of it just now. Why do you see this as at the heartbeat of OSM?
Yeah, I think that if you look at other games, most of them, you keep your team, but that doesn't allow to get in the game and play against your friends
Mm,
instantly, right?
mm,
So if you look at OSM, you can you can start at any time a new league with your friends, and then when you're done with it, you can start another one or you can join another one. So it's
Mm,
quite easy to get in and also quite easy to get out,
mm,
which makes it very different from other games.
mm,
Um, Aside from that, you have a match every day, right? I think that is also an important factor.
mm.
So there are when I started, there was, for example, a game where you had one match a week, like in real world, right? I think that with cricket it's the same, right?
Yeah.
You have like you don't have a match every day, but
Mm,
to keep people engaged and keep them in the game, it's very important that they have something every day to come back to, and that is what OSM has. So I think it might even work, the same. Thing might work for cricket as well. I'm not sure.
very
Never tried
interesting.
that.
Very interesting. You write very candidly about bad hires and management failures. Why was it important to show that side of growth? And give me an example if you can.
Sure. Bad management happens almost everywhere, and you learn a lot from specifically from mistakes.
Hmm.
Um, it makes the story much more human, and it also explains why it took so long before we finally had some success. We truly didn't understand what we were doing, and
Hmm.
honestly, it's a miracle it eventually worked out, and that's usually how it goes. Um, I think for us, one very telling example is that we bought our office building at some point because we thought we were going to have a lot of success in China.
Hmm.
So when we finally had some money, we invested it in the building, and we thought, okay, we were going to get a lot of players in China, and then everything will be paid back.
Hmm.
Well, in the end, nothing like that happened. So I
Hmm.
think we're still very small there. Yeah, I think most people can imagine that China is a difficult market to get traction. But we thought if we can get only 1%, and I hear that a lot, that people are saying something like that. We already have a lot of people because there are a lot of people there. Same for India, I guess.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, most of those big markets are very difficult to enter, and we couldn't do it. So I did have like a classmate from China who helped me a bit with translating the website, etc., in the game. But in the end, yeah, we didn't have any success there, and it
Hmm.
took much longer than we expected
Yeah.
before we got traction. And the biggest places where we have the traction is now in the Middle East and in
Hmm.
southern America, and also in Europe, of course.
Wow. You describe co-founder conflict with rare honesty. What do you now believe is essential for a healthy founder relationship?
Yeah, I think you must have respect for one another. If you're co-founders, and as co-founders, you want to have different responsibilities and expertise,
Hmm.
so that you can complement each other. And if you trust that the other person is doing their absolute best and you can rely on that, then you are a good team. And if you, for example, look at my co-founder and I, and also my brother who was involved in starting the company, we had very different expertises and also translated that into different responsibilities. And for me, that obviously was the product and the programming. And my brother, for example, was very good at the graphical design. So, if you look at my work in that area, that's not so good. He's
Mm,
really good at making something beautiful and working well. And Frank, my co-founder, he was more like an outgoing person and very enthusiastic, always talking to people.
mm,
So he was clearly best person to do that.
mm,
So I think that is very important that you respect each other, trust each other, and
mm.
then even if you have a conflict, you can resolve it.
Very interesting. You write about living with constant stress while still appearing calm externally. Tell me a little bit about the kind of stresses you had, and how did pressure shape your leadership style over time?
Well, a little pressure every now and then is not a problem, but
Yeah.
I'm not someone who makes a better on decisions under constant stress.
Mm,
I think the episode in my book where I cheat in my own game is a good example. I saw no other way out, and that's when you do the stupid things.
mm,
So, yet conflict situations always brought beautiful things as well. Like when we were sued by AC Milan and by the Bundesliga, they sent us letters where they said, "Okay, we're going to sue you, and you have to stop your activities." So that was a really stressful time. But we found a good lawyer and turned that threat into an opportunity, eventually securing the football rights and going around the world and
Mm,
getting all the rights for logos and player photos, etc., into the game
mm,
as well.
amazing. Another recurring theme that I found fascinating was money tension between founders. Why do you think this issue is still so poorly discussed in startup culture, not just in the Netherlands, but everywhere in the world?
I think nobody wants to show how much they are struggling
Mm,
sometimes.
correct.
You want to project success even when it's not always there.
Yeah.
And yeah, the advantage of a book is that you can look back on situations and say, yeah, that was really a tough time. I'm glad we're past that. And I think money worries are a theme for many startups. Um, and yeah, it's of course difficult for people if they are the if they live it themselves, and but I think it's important to talk about it, and even if it's in retrospect, you can really see that um, success is not something that you get instantly. It can take years to achieve it.
Mm,
And during those years, you also need to get through times, for example, without having the money you want or
mm,
that you can do the things that you want.
mm.
So, yeah,
What parts of the book were the hardest to write emotionally?
I think the first part about my youth,
Hmm.
because it's really personal, and also, yeah, something that's I wasn't sure how people would react on it, especially people that know me, of course, because they
Hmm.
would also read the book.
Yeah.
And the last part also about the sale and my divorce. So it's a bit of a spoiler, of course, for people who are going to read it. But
Mm.
a lot of things were happening at the same
Oh.
time, and I got divorced while selling my company, which is not the best timing. I think there's not never a good timing for something
Mm.
like that to happen, but
Mm.
it was really super stressful time. And also, I have children, so I had to think about them also in writing what I could write and what I couldn't write.
Mm.
I think I managed to write it in such a way that it wouldn't hurt them, but still, relay the difficulty that I had and the issue that it was an important factor in the whole story.
Mm.
So I think that worked out, but that was quite difficult, and I also needed some external, guidance from people reading the first
Yeah.
versions and refining that a bit, because
Mm.
I think in general I can say that personal problems are the hardest subjects to share
Absolutely.
with the outside world. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it also requires a lot of courage to share personal problems. And
Yeah, and it just makes a story more interesting. That is the whole thing. And
correct.
some people even said maybe you should, make do it even more. But there are certain limitations, and I think that's for the story what I shared is relevant. And yeah, and also I know people that go through the same issues, and often when you are an entrepreneur, things happen all at once, right?
I
It's
know.
something
I
that
know.
people will recognize.
I know.
You
No,
cannot.
I could relate
You
with
almost.
this.
I think if you would think up of a story like this, you wouldn't think of this, right?
Absolutely. I could relate with every bit of what you were writing because when I wrote my first book about on entrepreneurship, a lot of people, and it was a very, very big seller. I remember people wrote back to me and say, "Why were you so critical of yourself?" And
Yeah,
I said, "But that's the only way I could have told the story." But you I think your story was is brilliant. Thank you. I have time for two more questions for you, Yahun.
yeah,
What do you hope young founders take away from your mistakes rather than your successes?
yeah. Good question. Everyone makes mistakes, but you don't have to make all of them. So that's one of the things I always say to people. And one mistake I made, for example, was trying to do too many things at once. And that can be a good thing when you are discovering what you're good at and what you want
Mm,
to do. But as soon as you know where your strength lies, you should focus on that.
mm,
And I went on too far, too long with all sorts of games. And we created a lot of games, not on just online soccer manager, but we
mm,
thought we are a studio. We want to make more games. Otherwise, people won't take us seriously. And the company just didn't move forward with that. We didn't make enough money with the games we made. While we knew, I think, within already that Online Soccer Manager had the potential to become huge, which we didn't act upon. So it was a difficult. That was the most difficult time, I think, of the company. That we did do a lot of fun things, but if you can sustain yourself, at some point you have to see it and act on it. And I hope that others see that and think I would do that better.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Jeroen. After telling this story, what does winning mean to you now compared to when you first started?
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting question, and I thought about that a while. Winning is having stamina and building something lasting, I think. For me, at least, it is. I always believed I would end up somewhere better than where I started. And the fact that I succeeded strengthens my belief that that fate itself also contributed something to it. An acquisition isn't necessarily winning. I think that is something that I learned also. So you go. You set a goal. So I didn't, when I started a company, I didn't have a goal of selling the company. But when at a certain point I wanted to sell it, for me that became very important to achieve it. And in the end, I did achieve it, but because there were other factors like the divorce that I mentioned, I couldn't even really appreciate it at that moment. So it was kind of strange. So winning is not if you build something great, if you reach people, that is already something that's already winning for me. And also, for me, selling one company wasn't enough, so I had to sell another one. And now I'm not. I don't have that ambition anymore to do that. I'd rather help others, and having that peace of mind is also winning for me.
Correct. Well said. And on that note, Jeroen, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been. You know, while you have been a successful entrepreneur, you've built amazing products, you've sold amazing companies. What I got out of your book was you as a human being and your uh, pains, your joys, your successes, your failures that you have had the courage to share with the world. Thank you for speaking to me. Thank you for sharing some amazing lessons for my viewers and listeners, and for me, of course. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.